my co-authors, Marco Pagano and Elsa Roel. Of course. And the book is available on Amazon. Well, it looks like I am in a call center, but I will answer all questions during the talk. So please feel free to interrupt me during the keynote speech. I mean, the benefit of being a keynote speaker is that you don't have discussants, so you can almost lie and say anything that goes to your mind, so I should be stopped, if you think that things are not clear, please stop me. So when I was asked to choose a title for this talk, this was an afternoon, I was very busy with committee, the THCC and everything, and I thought very quickly about a title that I could give, and I could give, the title of the paper I'm going to present, but I thought, that I will get everybody bored to death if I do that. So I chose a more catchy title, which is What Makes Investor Click, but the true title is really this one. So this is yeah, you agree it's boring. But that's the academic title. So this is Demand for Information Uncertainty and the Response of US Treasury Securities to News, which is a joint work with Eddie Linamar, former PhD student at HEC, and Clara Vega, who are at the Fed in Washington. So what do we do in this paper? As you are going to see, I'm going to answer this question. At least I'm going to provide partial answer to this question, which I think is a very interesting question, because it is about demand of information, and I think we have new data to really test theories about demand for information. So one interest in those data, one of my interests in those data, is that there is evidence that asset managers are getting more and more interested in so-called alternative data. There is a survey by Greenwich Associates that was published last year on that. So this is a list of the percentage of various asset managers buying different type of alternative data. So for instance, you have a satellite imagery here. This is the paper we saw yesterday. But there is one type of data in which they seem to be that seem to attract their attention, which are the so-called search trends and web traffic data. So this is what I would call click data, because at the end those are data about searches on the internet by people, by individuals. Interest about some particular web pages by individuals. So the question is, why would people be interested in that? Why would people be willing to pay some money to buy those type of data? It's very different from news or sentiment data, because a click is a click. A click is not positive or negative. So you cannot give a tone to a click, it's not going to be negative. So it's not the same type of information that you get. Because immediately when you ask this question, you ask a second question, which is, what is the information that you have in click data? So again, that's not positive or negative, that's not directional information, if you wish. And so in order to answer this question, you have to think about people behavior. Why do they decide to click? Why do they decide to visit some website at some point in time? Why do they decide to click on some link to news, and so on and so forth? And here the first idea that comes to mind, because there is a growing literature on that, is people click, on some news, for instance, or link that direct to some news when they pay attention. When they pay attention to the market, when they pay attention to an event. But there are two types of attention. And there, we deviate a little bit from the literature on attention, because the literature on attention is typically not very clear about the nature of attention, what it means exactly, attention. And I found this terminology in the psychology literature. And in psychology literature, you have really two types of attention. There is what people call bottom-up attention. And bottom-up attention, this is the idea that people's attention is going to react to some stimuli. So in the case of the financial market, that might be there is some very large increase in the price of Apple stock, for instance, and that's going to catch my attention, and I want to know more about this stock. Or that might be an IPO that's going to attract people attention. So in this case, what people do is that they react really to an external stimulus. And my reading of part of the attention literature is that because of that, because you can attract the attention of various types of investors, you can use attention-grabbing events as the event. You can use the event as the stimulus. And so you can generate variation in the type of investors participating to the market. So there is a very nice paper on that by Zida and co-authors, Engelbert and Gao, who are using click data, searches, Google searches to try to measure attention to a particular stock, and they show that this is essentially a proxy for retail investors' participation. And when retail investors participate more to the market, well, that generates overreaction, that generates then reversal in the future. So this is a bit like, this literature, I think, is that people are using attention a little bit like a proxy for participation of a certain type of investor. And there is a more recent paper by Aviv Ben-Raphael, Zida, and Brian Israel, a very interesting paper in the Review of Financial Studies, in which they use attention by institutional investors to news released by Bloomberg, well, on traders Bloomberg screen, as a measure of institutional investor attention to, for instance, to earning announcement. And they show that when institutional investors pay more attention, then the market adjusts faster to earnings announcement, for instance. So in this view, it's difficult to distinguish attention for participation of a certain type of investors. But there is another type of attention, which is called top-down attention in the psychology literature, which I would call simply information demand, which is simply the idea that I want to pay attention to something when I have to make an important decision, and I have to collect more information. I want to become more informed before making my attention. So it's a very different type of attention. This is what, as an economist, I would call demand for information. And again, in the literature, the difference between the two types of attention, whether this is demand for information by institutional investors or not so clear. What we are going to do in this paper is really to focus on this type of attention, demand for information. And when you think about demand for information, and if you want to use click data or search data on the internet as a measure of information demand, you have to be very careful about the fact that information demand is clearly endogenous. It's not something that falls from the sky. That is, you have to pay some effort to get more information about a stock and so on and so forth, and those efforts are going to depend on changes in factors that make the marginal value of information, that generate variation in the marginal value of information. So the key point that we make in this paper, or key idea that we develop in this paper, is that because click data may reflect information demand, that might be a good proxy as well for uncertainty. If you think about when people are likely to demand more information, this is when they become more uncertain. And, yeah.
Is your mic on?
I'm not sure. Let's see. Okay. Better?
Yes.
You want me to restart? Okay. So we have decided that click data can be used to measure investor uncertainty. It's going to be a proxy for uncertainty. You demand more information when you are more uncertain. So that means one way to validate this, of course, I can look, and I'm going to do that, a correlation between measure of uncertainty about a source of risk and attention, and I'm going to show that there is correlation. But as someone was mentioning this morning, the problem is that if I find very high correlation, then why do I need to use information demand to proxy for uncertainty? My measure of uncertainty will not be useful anymore. So I want this correlation not to be perfect, and I want to find an external way to validate my measure. And so the external way that we are going to use is that if this logic is correct, then more information demand ahead of news arrival, news resolving uncertainty about a source of risk, should be predictive of the size of the price reaction to the news. But when you think about, so the first thing to show is that there is predictive power, and we are going to show that. The more interesting question, and this is where economic reasoning is useful, is what should be the sign of the correlation. We're not going to talk about causality. There is no causal effect here. It's just talking about correlation. We'll come back on that. The question is, what is the size of the effect? And that's where this presentation is kind of linked to the presentation by Jonathan in the last session, which is, in the last session, you had more Edgar searches, and before announcement, lower reaction of prices to earnings announcement. So if people search for more information, they become less uncertain, so they are less surprised by the news, they react less. So maybe the prediction would be negative correlation. When people demand more information, then they become less uncertain. So that seems a bit strange, which is, I say, more uncertainty, that triggers search for more information, but if people search for more information, they are less uncertain, so then everything becomes a bit paradoxical, which is, What is uncertainty exactly? Well, here we are going to argue that uncertainty, this is of course endogenous as well, which is there might be exogenous shock that make uncertainty larger. You react to those shocks by demanding more information. That's going to reduce your uncertainty, of course. And what we are interested in is not measuring, unconditional uncertainty. You want to measure people uncertainty after the effort they put in collecting information. So now we have information demand and uncertainty, which are endogenous. So what we are going to argue, based on a model, is that depending on the source of the shock, the correlation can be positive or negative. And I'm going to try to provide a convincing argument for why the correlation should be in general negative. It can be should be in general positive, sorry. It can be negative sometimes, that depends on the source of the shock, but when you look at data like that and correlate information demand, click data, with, let's say, the strength of price reaction to the news, you should expect positive correlation if the main driver of information demand is increase in uncertainty. So this is where, in order, to think about this correlation and interpret, click data, you really need to think about economic theory. As someone yesterday mentioned that we need more economic theory when we have big data. I think this is very true. You cannot make sense of the correlation you see in the data and even think about, developing this test or making sense of this test without thinking carefully about what drives information demand. So let me come back on the intuition here. The intuition is very simple. I mean, the theoretical part of the paper is very standard. This is just kind of variation on Grossman instability. Let's say that you have exogenous shock. Let's say that you are looking at a source of a source of risk which is varying over time. In our test, we are going to look at uncertainty about future monetary policy, future interest rate. We have to think about uncertainty about a specific topic, a specific risk. So in our case, that's going to be interest rate. So let's say that you have variation in investors' uncertainty, time variation in investors' uncertainty about future monetary policy. So you have times of high uncertainty, low uncertainty, high uncertainty, low uncertainty. So when there is a positive shock to uncertainty, people start searching for more information because the marginal benefit of collecting information is larger when uncertainty is larger. That's going to be the first thing. As people demand more information, then their uncertainty is going to decrease. But what we show is that in equilibrium, this is never sufficient to fully offset the initial shock. So at the end, you end up in a situation where in the same period, you have high uncertainty after conditioning for people information and high information demand. So if you cannot weigh control for people uncertainty, then you can use information demand as a proxy for uncertainty. So that's what we formalize, in the theory. And then one prediction, one implication of that logic is the one I was mentioning before, which is if this logic is correct, high information demand before news, before macroeconomic announcement, resolving uncertainty about future monetary policy, should predict stronger reaction of treasury prices, for instance, to the macroeconomic announcement. And that just comes from Bayesian learning. Bayesian learning tells me that the impact of news on people's expectation, on people's belief, should increase with the accuracy of news, of course, but with their prior uncertainty. Prior uncertainty in the way I've defined it, that is after conditioning on their effort to collect information. So this is the predictive part. This is where we claim that if we have click data, we can use click data not to forecast the direction of return in the future, but to forecast the strength of the price reaction to news arrival. So with click data, you have information about future volatility, essentially. That's what we propose. So I will explain the type of data that we use in detail later on in the talk, but in order to test those ideas, we just look at a very special case. So that's what I call a proof of concept. And we don't do a very, very large-scale study for many different types of asset classes. We just focus on US treasuries, and we look at macroeconomic announcements. So we look at uncertainty about future interest rate. Those are macroeconomic announcements that people care about because they provide information about future monetary policy. And we zoom, in fact, on non-farm payroll announcements because they are known to move the market a lot. They are known to move treasury yields a lot because when non-farm payroll figures are better than expected, people expect the Fed to raise interest rates in the future. So that's kind of bad news for the treasury market. Treasury prices go down, yields increase. So that's well known. So we focus on this type of announcement, and we test whether when people demand more information ahead of non-farm payroll announcement and other influential macroeconomic announcement, it is the case that treasury prices react more strongly to the surprise in the announcement.
So if people demand a lot of information, as you say, the uncertainty will increase. So if let's assume they acquire infinite amount of information, they have no uncertainty before the event. So we should see lower reaction.
Yes.
So
but
you also explain that.
Yes, but they will not acquire an infinite amount of information for two reasons. First of all, it is costly to acquire information. And then there is a feedback, which is as people, which is important when you think about this uncertainty thing, which is as people buy more and more information, their trade contain more information. That is, people buy information to trade on information before the event, before the announcement. And as people buy and more information, they become more and more aggressive in their trades because they face less and less uncertainty. And as they trade more and more aggressively on their trades, prices reveal more and more information. But if prices reveal information, why buy information in the first place? So we are back to the Grossman-Stiglitz paradox. So that's a force that prevents, even if the cost of information acquisition is small, that prevents the outcome you describe. And that's important. In fact, again, uncertainty is measured conditional on all people information, which includes their own private information and the information they get from market prices, for instance. Okay, so how do we measure information demand? Well, we use click data, that is number of clicks on internet links directing to news stories about non-farm payroll announcement over this period of time, 2012, 2018. We have 79 announcements, yeah?
So can you tell that these news stories are informative in some way? So in other words, if the non-farm payroll announcement is coming in 2 days and I'm highly uncertain, I spend all my time searching for news about it. Maybe the news story is just trying to tell me that, hey, lots of people are uncertain and this is a big announcement and it's going to take place at this time.
Yes.
But
yes.
It's not telling me anything about the event itself in some sense.
No, in fact, we are not saying that you are per se searching information about the event itself. You are just searching information about future interest rate, monetary policy. And one way to form expectation about monetary policy is to search information about some macroeconomic variables which are supposed to influence. Yeah, that's an important thing. Our model is not about speculation about the next announcement. It's really about speculation about what's going to be the level of interest rate in the future in this case.
Wouldn't looking at kind of the high-frequency path of the realized volatility
yes.
of asset prices kind of reveal
yes.
the same kind of information?
That's one of the control in our test, which is, of course, again, if you follow this logic, then you may say, okay, but there are many other measures of uncertainty I could use to make the same prediction. And so in our test, we control for various measures of uncertainty, including realized volatility. Yeah. Yeah, the question is, we do not claim, that this is the only way to predict the strength of the reaction. We claim that there is additional information in this measure of information demand. So this is, let me show you the main result, the main empirical finding just in one picture. So this is for the 2-year US Treasury, and this is the yield reaction of the 2-year US Treasury in our sample to the non-farm payroll announcement, which takes place at 8:30 on the first Friday of every month. And we cut the sample in four different type of cases. Well, announcements which are better than expected, these are the green line. Then treasury prices go down, yields go up. Announcements which are lower than expected, so then treasury prices go up, yields go down. Those are the red lines. And then, in each case, we cut the sample in two. The case in which my measure of information demand here is larger than its median value in the sample. This is the plain line, and the case in which it is below the median value. This is the dashed line. So clearly, what this picture shows is that you have a much larger reaction when information demand ahead of the announcement is stronger. So in the empirical part of the paper, what we do is essentially to see whether this result is robust when we control for many additional predictors of the strength of the price reaction to the surprise, especially many measures of uncertainty that people have used, and the result is robust. So there is this strong positive correlation between information demand captured by my proxy, by my click data, and the strength of the price reaction to the surprise. And it's very different, you know, from what people have found, for instance, using Google search. Because in the case of Google search, if this was a proxy for the participation of retail investors, I would expect some underreaction or some overreaction, some delayed, you know, some lag adjustment to the news. But in the treasury market, you don't have that. You see that you have an immediate adjustment, and then essentially this is flat. So again, in the empirical part of the paper, we test that formally. But here, there is no overreaction, no underreaction to the announcement, and that's not correlated with the proxy for information demand.
So what is the timing of the clicks? Is this news before?
Yes. So yes, that's an important point. In our test, in most of our tests, we are using click data shortly before the announcement, in a 2-hour window before the announcement. But our data allows us, you know, to consider longer window, up to 1 month before the announcement, back to the previous announcement, essentially. And this does not really change the result. It's just that as you move further away from the announcement, our measure is becoming noisier. Because we are, as you will see in the way we build the measure, we are probably capturing other type of interest by people for the news in our data. And most of the action anyway, in terms of click, I will come back to that, is before the announcement. And we do that for non-farm payroll announcement, but we do that as well for other influential announcements. I will talk about that later on, and we find the same result. So there is a strong positive correlation between people search for information before announcement and the reaction of prices to the announcement. That's exactly the opposite of what Jonathan was showing before, which is when people search more on Edgar, then you know there is lower reaction. How can it be so? Well, the reason, and my guess is the reason is that information demand is endogenous, and the reason why you search in each case is not the same. My guess is that in the case of Edgar, the logic of the model that was the logic of the dark pool story that you were presenting is that dark pool is like, you know, varying the amount of dark pool availability. This is like varying the extent to which prices are going to be revealing. So this is varying another source of profitability for your information. But this is very much like varying the cost of information, not, you know, the uncertainty you face. And in this case, my model will predict exactly, you know, your fight, which is if, you know, variation in the time series of information demand is mainly due to variation in information demand or variation in the extent to which prices can reveal information for change in market design, then yes, you can generate the opposite correlation, but that's very special, in fact. That's a very special situation. There are very few changes in market design that are going to generate this type of change in the noisiness of prices.
So usually on Thursday, the initial unemployment claims come out.
Sorry?
On the Thursday before, so on a weekly basis, you've got initial unemployment claims coming out.
Yes.
So if there's a big surprise in that, do you think there's an impact then on the number of searches that you have for this monthly indicator that comes out?
Maybe. So here I rely a lot on the expertise of my co-author, Clara Vega, who knows a lot about those announcements. And she has a paper where she shows with her co-authors that there are really 3 announcements which are moving treasury prices, which is this one, non-farm payroll, retail sales, and the third one is, I forgot the name, but the one which is released by the Institute for Supply Management, ISM. So those are the 3 announcements which really move the market, and those are the ones on which we focus. So this one is not in our sample because it does not seem to move the market enough.
Because I think that Hegel had quite noisy in the sense that markets think that sometimes when you have a big number, that it's kind of wrong and it will be revised.
Yes, no, that's true. So that's something we control for. So here again, this is kind of the univariate result. In the regression, we control for that. That is, we try to control for the noise in the announcement precisely by using what you say, which is the revision in the announcement subsequently by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yeah. Okay, so I think there is a contribution. Our contribution is to two different literatures. First, we contribute to the literature on uncertainty measurement. There is a growing literature on this topic in economics. There is a very interesting survey of this literature by Nick Bloom in the Journal of Economics Perspective, and he says there is no perfect measure of uncertainty, but instead a broad range of proxies. So in a sense, you know, our goal here, it's a very small contribution, but our goal is to add, you know, to this set of proxies. So you have realized volatility, the implied volatility, the VIX, the dispersion of analysis forecast that people have used. And Nick Bloom has been developing with co-authors measures based on news content. That is, for instance, they have a paper in QG where they count the number of words which are related to policy, economic policy uncertainty, and so on and so forth, to develop, you know, a time-varying measure of economic uncertainty. So in a sense, you know, what we do is kind of related to that, except that here, you know, this is really based on news supply. These are articles written by journalists that says nothing about news consumption. You know, the market for information is a bit special in the sense that supply might not be equal to demand. That is, people may write articles, but the articles are not read. So in our test, we control for news coverage, for news articles written about the forthcoming announcement, about the non-farm payroll announcement, to show that even after controlling for the supply of information, if you wish, there is still predictive power in information demand. So we are really capturing something that varies people interest in the forthcoming macroeconomic announcement or the non-farm payroll figure, controlling for the number of news to which they have access for this particular announcement. So it's demand and not supply. And then there are papers, you know, using click data that I mentioned before. There is this paper about Google Search. There is this recent paper in Review of Financial Studies. There is another interesting paper by Adrina Fedic, which looks at time dispersion in clicks and how it is related to trading volume after earnings announcement. But another difference with those papers is that those papers, they tend to focus on adjustment of prices, the speed of price adjustment after news arrival, and they show that the speed depends on with paying attention to the market, while in our case, we look at people attention before announcement, and we try to predict, you know, the strength of the price reaction to the announcement. So it's not exactly the same type of exercise. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to present a theory that makes, you know, those things about endogeneity of information demand and correlation between information demand and price reaction to news clearer. Then I will present in detail our data. We are using data that nobody has used before, very different from Google Search data. Come back to that. Then the empirical findings, and then I will present additional evidence in favor of my interpretation, of our interpretation of the results. Okay, so again, the model is very standard. You know, that's a variation on Grossman-Stiglitz. So we have 4 dates, and we consider the market for a risky asset with a payoff F at the last date, where F has a normal distribution and a mean 0. And at date 0, before some announcement which will happen in the future, speculators, risk-averse speculators with a Cara utility function, they can acquire a signal about F. And this is a noisy signal. Eta I is the noise in the signal. But what investors can do is that they can reduce the noise in the signal, they can increase the precision of the signal by putting more effort in information collection. So investor I can get a precision tau eta high at cost C of tau eta I. And we assume that that's technical assumption that the cost of information is strictly convex. And so what I'm going to call demand for information in this model, aggregate demand for information, this is the sum of the precision chosen by each investor. So each investor has its own demand for information, potentially its own theta I, that's going to be endogenous, that's going to be chosen in equilibrium. And then what I will call aggregate demand is the sum of all those precision. And uncertainty after information collection, as I will show later on, depends on this, depends on aggregate demand. Depends on aggregate demand. And then speculators have the possibility to trade on their signal. They are going to, so they make, you know, the choice of their precision. They collect information at date 0. So this is the stage at which they click on new stories if you wish to get information. They search. And then they get their signal. They form, you know, their idea about what is the payoff of the asset at date 1, and they make a trading decision. So this is, again, before the announcement. They have the opportunity to trade on their signals, so they send an order, a demand, which is a function of their signal and the price. Their demand function depends on what they know and the price of the asset. And then, as usual, we have noise traders. They have an inelastic demand U, which has a normal distribution. And then we have risk-neutral investors without, you know, any particular type of information. I call those guys dealers. They observe the aggregate demand. The aggregate demand is going to be the sum of that plus that. And they set a price which is equal to their expectation of F given aggregate demand. That's the expectation because they are risk-neutral. So if the price was to deviate from that, their demand would be infinite. There would be no market clearing. So the important thing is that aggregate demand depends on the demand of those guys, and the demand of those guys depends on their signal, so aggregate demand is informative. But it is not perfectly informative because of the noise, so that's important. But you know, the information contained in that depends on the effort that people have put in collecting information in the first place. So that's the date 1 stage. A price is formed of this stage, and then at date 2, some news arrive. I call the news NFP, like non-farm payroll, but that's any type of news about F. And the news is noisy. That's, you know, the revision in the figure that may happen subsequently. So that's public information. Everybody observes this information, and dealers, they revise they reset their price, they revise their expectation of F given the news. So the price at day 2 is the expectation of F, conditional on, of course, the information revealed at this stage and the news. And our focus is on two things. It is on the difference between P2 and P1. How does the change in price depend on the news? And more interestingly, what are the determinants of the sensitivity of the change in price to the news? And the second variable of interest is what is the effort that people put in searching for information? How does this influence the sensitivity of the price at day 2, the change in price from date 1 to date 2 to the news? So really, you know, the only interesting stage in a sense is here, and in between this date and this date. What happens at this date is very standard. Okay, so, but in order to get there, I need to solve for the price at each date. So let's start with the price at date 1, fixing, you know, people, information, acquisition choices at date 0. The price at date 1, again, this is this expectation. And V1, if you wish, this is the informational content of this aggregate demand. When you observe aggregate demand, it turns out that you observe a noisy signal about F because people, again, trade, you know, on their private signals. You have information aggregation in the market. And when the market aggregates, if you wish, the information aggregation gives you this noisy signal. The important thing to observe is that the noise in this signal, which is due to people trading in the market, is endogenous. That's going to be key. It's endogenous because that depends on people demand for information, and people demand for the asset, and people demand for the asset depends on their information demand, and so that's going to depend on aggregate information demand. So that's a very standard effect, but the variance of this noise, the informativeness, if you wish, or the inverse of the informativeness of aggregate demand or the order flow, depends on information demand, aggregate information demand, and the larger is aggregate information demand, the less noisy is aggregate demand for the asset.
Is there a reason to think that the intensity of clicks or the amount, how much you click on something is about the intensity of information demand and not about just the amount of noise volatility? It seems like all of the formulas are going to be related to the variance of chi-e, in which case you're going to get a function which you can replace sigma u squared, like increase in sigma u squared when you're forced.
Yes, okay, but see, okay, in this equation, so you're right. I mean, the variance of this thing is going to play an important role because again, that's going to determine market participant uncertainty just before the announcement. So the variance of this thing is going to be important. That's endogenous. This is where the endogenous part of uncertainty is coming from. In part, it's coming from as well, people information acquisition. But that's an important piece. Now, when you take the variance of this thing, there are two determinants. There is the variance of U. The variance of noise trading is important, but that's a parameter in the model. And there is the square of that, which is not a parameter, that's determined in equilibrium.
Right. The question is, you could also think about like running a model for like why all of a sudden like lots of
yes.
noise traders like show up like.
So I'm going to do this exercise. I'm going, to say once I have solved for the model, I'm going to say, okay, why is it that the variance of this thing is changing? That can be for any shock. The reason can be any shock on the exogenous parameters. So one of them being this one. But even if I shock that, I'm going to have an effect on people incentive to acquire information. That's another type of shock on uncertainty that I can create. I will come back on that. Okay, so then uncertainty after information collection, uncertainty in equilibrium, is a very simple expression. So this is the variance of F conditional on the information produced by the market, aggregate demand. And you can write it in this very simple way. This is just this expression. So what is important in this expression is that this is essentially the product of the variance of F, which is exogenous. Let's call that prior uncertainty, and the variance of the noise in aggregate demand, which is endogenous. So for instance, imagine thinking about what you just say. Imagine that the variance of F is 6, but this thing is time varying. The variance of U is time varying. So what happens when the variance of U is going up? Well, on uncertainty. So in order to think about that, I have to think about what is the effect of the variance of U on the variance of this term. Well, the first order effect is that that's going to make the variance of this term larger. But there is an indirect effect, which is that's going to change people's incentive to acquire information in a way that I cannot guess without solving the model. So I have, in order to make predictions about the way exogenous shocks in the model affect uncertainty, I have first to solve for information demand in equilibrium.
Is there like an a priori reason for thinking that the primary effect operates through information choice and not through the arrival of people who are stupid?
No, but that I can test. I will come back to that.
I totally get why you need a model to explain like the information choice problem, but it's not obvious to me that this is the first order effect.
Yeah, but I take your point, which is, again, it's an interesting question to ask, what will be the prediction of the model if I just vary the variance of U? I will come back to that, okay? And then we can try to see whether the data are more in line with shocks to the variance of U without endogenous information demand, or more in line with shocks to the variance of U and endogenous information demand.
How do you think of the fact that for many of these macro news announcements, including NFP, there are forecasts by professional forecasters ahead of time. So it's as if people are trying to forecast the signal, and dispersion in those forecasts might be a proxy for the amount of uncertainty as well.
Yes, I agree. That's what people have done in the literature. They use, this dispersion as a measure of uncertainty sometimes.
But rather than the signal just showing up, people are forecasting the signal ahead of time, and then the signal shows up. I don't know if that has a role to play.
No, you could say that people who are formulating forecasts, they are just a special type of agents in the model who are also, collecting information, except that their incentives are not super clear. I mean, the incentive of my agents are super clear. They want to get information because they want to take a position based on their private information. Professional forecasters, I'm not exactly sure about what are their incentives to provide accurate forecasts. Okay, so then what is the price at day 2? That's simply the price at day 1 plus an adjustment which reflects the surprise in the announcement, the surprise being the difference between the realization of the news and what people expect the news to be given information aggregation at day 1. So again, this is what we are going to do in the empirical test, but in the literature what people do is that they replace this expectation precisely by what you were saying, by professional forecasters forecast. That may create problem. We are not sure, that professional forecasters forecast is equal to this thing. But on the empirical side, we are going to do what people do. And then beta is the variable of interest. This is the sensitivity of the price to the surprise. and the sensitivity of the price to the surprise is increasing with uncertainty just before the news. So uncertainty defined in this way, which is endogenous. So now if I want to think about the effect of exogenous shock on this coefficient, uncertainty before information arrival, and information demand, I have to close the model by solving for information demand. So this is the last stage of the model. So this is what I'm doing here. I write people expected utility at date 0. So this has this expression. This is the certainty equivalent. And I solve for the optimal information demand of each investor I. So there are two observations here. So first of all, the benefit of information, the expected utility that I get for collecting a certain amount of information, for choosing this variable, depends on this term, which is uncertainty. But uncertainty just before the news arrival, uncertainty given people effort in information collection. So when this thing is larger, the marginal benefit of information is getting larger. You can compute the derivative of that. That's something that comes up immediately. That's the idea I was mentioning initially, which is when uncertainty increases, the marginal value of collecting information, the marginal benefit of collecting information goes up. People react by collecting more information. The tricky part is coming from the fact that because this thing is exogenous, when everybody reacts by collecting more information, this thing goes up, this thing is going to go down. So that's going to reduce the marginal benefit of collecting information. So the net effect in equilibrium is unclear. What we show in that's where you need to solve the model, is that the second effect, the feedback effect, if you wish, is always less than the initial shock. So when I have an exogenous shock that makes this thing larger, then people are going to demand more information in equilibrium. So this is what I show on this picture. So here you have the marginal cost for one specific parametrization, the marginal benefit of collecting information, the derivative of this thing, with respect to my information demand, when prior uncertainty is low and when prior uncertainty is large, the variance of f here that I vary. So when prior uncertainty goes up, the marginal benefit of collecting information goes up, this curve shifts up, and so I move to a new equilibrium point, holding constant this thing. So what I don't show, on this picture is that as people move to this point, the green line is shifting down. That makes everything a bit more complex, but never back to this point. So we are always in between. That is, if I increase the variance of f, I make the marginal benefit of collecting information larger, people demand more information in the aggregate. And now I have to ask, I can show, for instance, this is what I do on this picture. When I increase the variance of the asset payoff, I'm going to make information demand larger. I'm going to make uncertainty larger even after collecting information because the feedback effect is never strong enough. And I'm going to make the price reaction coefficient beta larger because when uncertainty before news arrival is larger, the price reacts more to the surprise. So here, this is when I consider shocks to the variance of the asset payoff. Instead of shocks to the variance of asset payoff, I could do shocks to the variance of noise trading, the variance of U. But that's exactly the same thing. That generates exactly the same picture. But again, with information demand. That's this red line. So when the variance of noise trading goes up, the first order effect is that that's going to make aggregate demand less informative. So people are more uncertain. People react by buying more information. That creates a feedback in the opposite direction, but never strong enough to compensate for the first effect. So we get exactly the same prediction if everything is coming from time variation in the variance of noise trading. And here my prediction is that if you can observe a proxy for the red line, then you can predict the dashed line, because the red line is realized at date 1, the dashed line is observed at date 2. So I can use realization of this thing to predict this thing. That's essentially what we do. So of course you could say, why not use the blue line to predict this thing? I could, if I was able to measure this thing well, but that's precisely the challenge, which is difficult to measure conditional variances.
Why don't we just model the ratio of this thing to begin with?
Of the ratio of
like fundamental value variance and noise variance. Like we treat them as two things model, we don't actually see them separately anyway. Like they always show you, if we think about price impact, it's always the ratio.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I could specify everything in terms of this ratio.
Like we could
Yes, you're right. That's probably what's going on. I have to think a little bit more because you see that the variance of f appears in this equation in a way which is a bit different from the variance of u. The variance of u is not here. It's not visible. It is embedded in the variance of chi d, but yeah.
I guess the observation, it seems like it should be if we can't separately identify them in the data.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I have to think more about that. Okay, let me move to the empirical part. So what are the data that we use? We are using data from Bitly. So Bitly is a provider. They do something very simple. Maybe you have already used Bitly. They just give you the possibility to shorten internet links. So let's say you want to share your last working paper on SSRN. So maybe sometimes, you know, SSRN, they have this very long link. It's not very convenient. So you want to tell the world that you have a new working paper, and you want to do that on Twitter. So you are going to use the service of Bitly to shorten, you know, the link, and use that to share the Godspell. Okay. So here, this is an example. So this is a link to an article about non-farm payroll, and I took, you know, this link, I pasted it in this box on the Bitly website, and then Bitly returned to me a shortened link. Those are our data. So we obtained data from Bitly about all SURLs, shortened URL links, from 2011 to 2018. All SURLs pointing to news provided by news agencies. So we have something like 59 news providers in the data, and we have 70 million SURLs. So this is a very large data set, and I'm going to use a tiny part. No, empiricists, when I present this paper, they say, but why are you using a tiny fraction of the data? So I'm going to, like accountants do, you know, I'm going to zoom on I'm going to explain how we filter the data. But we have, you know, if you have ideas about papers to write, we have a lot of data. So we have the original URL for each SURL. So for instance, this one for each of this one. The logging name of the creator of the SURL, a timestamp of when it was created, the number of clicks on each SURL, when people click, and so on and so forth. So a lot of information associated with each SURL. So we are going to use, again, we are going to make a very limited use of the data, just to show, you know, the idea that I was mentioning before. So we use click on SURLs directing to news about monetary policy and interest rates. So already we are going to drastically reduce, you know, all those data. And here there are two possible approaches. So we are going to use keywords to detect, you know, news, to detect headlines that suggest that we have news about interest rate, monetary policy, and so on and so forth. So here we could use two approaches, which is use keywords that relate to interest rate and monetary policy in general, like Fed, interest rate, FOMC, and so on and so forth, or use keywords that relate to a particular macroeconomic variable that people use to form forecasts about monetary policy. So we have decided to use the second approach, but we are developing tests using the first approach, and we find essentially the same thing. So again, as I was explaining before, we focus mainly on non-farm payroll announcements. I have already explained what it is. So how do we identify news about non-farm payroll? So we use the following keywords: payroll, or jobs reports, or unemployment. And we look at all SURL in our data. We look at all the titles of news in our data. And we select all the SURLs that are related, you know, that contain those keywords. So overall, we have 30,000 NFP SURLs and about 650,000 NFP clicks, non-farm payroll clicks on those news. So this is a tiny fraction, you know, of the 70 million SURLs I was mentioning before. Maybe we could do more, but at the moment, this is what we do. And on top of that, we focus on a very narrow window, but that we can extend, and we did. Around the announcement, we just look at 2 hours before the announcement, 2 hours after the announcement. So let me show you this picture. So this is the evolution before, this is the average number of clicks, you know, on those SURLs before the announcement at 8:30 on the first Friday of each month, and after the announcement. So obviously, you know, you have much more action after the announcement than before the announcement, yeah? I think I didn't say, but we have this data in this statistic in the paper. But that tells you already something, and you see we have many more clicks after than before, presumably because many of the SURLs are created after.
Yeah, this would be interesting to look at it just in the articles that were posted before.
Yeah, this is what we do. We are going to focus only on this part, and we are going to see whether clicks that happen before can forecast the reaction of prices at the time of the announcement. We are not going to use at all those clicks. We don't use them, in fact. While the literature on speed of adjustment after news essentially use this type of measure of attention after the announcement. So what are the news sources? Well, mainly Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg, especially before, and again after, but less so after. So that gives us confidence. We are not claiming that traders, are using Bitly to get their information or searching the news as people do in our sample. It's just that we hope that general interest in the economic about, non-farm payroll is correlated with traders' interest in information about future interest rate. And the fact that, people mainly get information from Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg here give us confidence in this. So let me first show you correlation. So this is the correlation table. It shows the correlation, the monthly correlation between our measure of information demand and various measures of uncertainty that people have used before. So for instance, this measure based on news of Nick Bloom. So we have this positive correlation, which is significant. The VIX measure, there is positive correlation, but not so strong. There is this measure of realized volatility, so you have positive correlation. The dispersion, of expert forecast before the announcement that people have used sometimes, positive correlation. The bottom line is that our measure of information demand, which is supposed to go vary positively with uncertainty, is positively correlated with uncertainty. Interestingly, we have used as well the Google index. So we have used, Google searches to try to measure information demand about, using the same keywords that I was showing before. And the correlation of this measure of information demand with this measure of uncertainty is not that strong. So it's not the same information that you have in the Google measure and our measure. And here you have information supply. And again, you see that information supply is based on the number of news with headlines, which are the same as containing the keywords I have mentioned before. And we use Ravenpack, to measure news coverage here. And again, the correlation here is not that great. So our measure of information demand is capturing something about uncertainty, which is not captured by those two additional measures that look a bit like our measure. Let me skip that, and let me move to the main result. So we run the following regression. So we run a regression of the change in yield over the 30 minutes that follow an announcement, starting from the first minute just before the announcement, over the surprise being the difference between the non-farm payroll figure and the forecast made by professional forecasters just before the announcement. And we normalize the surprise by the standard deviation. Let me skip that, and let me move directly to this table. So this is essentially a formal analysis of the picture I have shown in the introduction. So here we just count the number of clicks on SURL in our sample before each announcement, and we use that as we interact this with the surprise. So we use that to try to forecast the extent of the surprise, and we find a strong positive correlation between beta, this thing, and the number of clicks. So again, this is just, the quick way to say that what we have here is that when people click more on SURLs in our sample before the announcement, then the treasury prices react more to one unit surprise. So that's the predictive part. And if you look at various ways to measure information demand, you get the same result. So of course, the question is, does this survive when you add additional predictors for the surprise, when you add additional control variables? So what we did, I'm going to tell a long story short, but we consider many possible predictors. Try to be a bit systematic about that. That is, we mainly consider measures of uncertainty or predictors that people have found previously in the literature. So here we have all the measures of uncertainty I have shown in the correlation table over the period 2012-2018, which is not a great period for the test because there is not too much variation in interest rate, but there might be variation in people's expectation about future monetary policy. And as you can see, when I run the long regression, the only predictor that survives is my measure of uncertainty. Well, if that was not the case, I would probably not be here. There is some indigeneity here, of course, in the type of result I show you. And same thing, this is for the 2-year treasury. That's for the 5-year treasury, same type of result. I'm going to skip the table for the 10-year treasury. This is very consistent. And let me finish on something, just to come back to your question. Well, maybe this is shocks to the variance of noise trading, I don't know. Maybe this is shocks to the variance of the asset payoff, maybe this is shocks to the variance of noise trading. Those two types of shocks can generate the time series variation information demand that generate the positive correlation that I find in the test. So that could be another interpretation. So how can we disentangle the two? Was a bit your question. One thing that we do in the paper to go in this direction is that we look at the price impact of trades before information arrival. Because if the variation in information demand is coming from this thing, then the prediction is for the price impact of trades is different from a source of variation which is coming from this thing. And so let me explain quickly why. If you have a shock to the variance of noise trading, you are going to make aggregate demand for the asset less informative. That goes down. That's the first effect. People react by buying more information because they are more uncertain. The market conveys prices, trades convey less information. That offset part of the initial effect, but that never fully offset the initial effect in equilibrium, which means in equilibrium, after a shock to the variance of noise trading, I get aggregate demand, or the flow, which is less informative. Why I get exactly the opposite if I consider shocks to the variance of the asset payoff. So one way to try to disentangle the two types of shocks in the data is to run price impact regression before the arrival of information and see whether when information demand is stronger ahead of information arrival, the price impact of trade is smaller or larger. So this is essentially this regression. So this is just what people in market macrostructure call a price impact regression. This is a regression of returns on order flow. That's before, that's after the announcement. And what we claim is that the sign of this coefficient tells us something about whether variation in this measure of information demand are coming from shock to the variance of noise trading or shocks to the variance of the asset payoff. That should be negative in the first case, positive in the second case. And what we find is that this is positive, not negative. So it seems that when people demand more information, as I have defined it, trades have more impact on prices before the announcement than when they demand less information. Trades are more informed, if you wish.
So this is it's a cool idea. It does seem like it's not quite a fair fight because you're building in time series sort of like fluctuations through like people's endogenous sort of choice of information.
Yes.
And there is no corresponding time variation in the actual like demand noise.
No, that's my point, which is you could allow for shocks, to the variance of the variance of noise. And if this was the case, people will react to that, and that will give me the opposite sign in this regression.
I feel like this is the universal signal for me to shut up.
No, but we have been thinking quite a lot about that, but that's a very good. So let me just conclude. So it's there with other macroeconomic announcement. So what makes investor click? Well, shocks to the value of collecting financial information. For this reason, click on news can be used to measure investors' uncertainty. And so what is the next step? Well, show that click data are valuable for volatility trading, option trading maybe. That's my final word.